Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Insider's Edge podcast here on the WZWA Network. I'm your host with the most on the West Coast, Karlifornia Inferior. It's a joy to be with you all once again. And speaking of a joy right here, right now, this is what this show is all about. I'm so excited to talk to somebody that I watched when I first became a pro wrestling fan. Huge fan of this guy right here, former WWF Tag Team Champion, champion in life itself, the one and only Mr. Bull Buchanan. How are you, sir?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. It's great to have the opportunity to speak with you and learn a little bit about your life, especially in your days as a pro wrestler. First question usually, Bull, on the show is, before you got into the business, how did you become a fan of professional wrestling?
So I grew up in Georgia. And, of course, I watched Georgia Championship Wrestling. I found it when I was 7 or 8 years old. And one of their big towns was Carrollton, Georgia, which was only a few miles from where I lived. It's a very small town. But my dad, I think my dad kind of liked it, but he knew that I liked it. So he would carry me when they came to town, which was every 2 weeks. And, at that time, you could see Ric Flair, you could see Wahoo McDaniel, Tommy, all these guys. So I just grew up a fan, and I started reading. I figured out that about the wrestling magazines. Yeah, and we had a show, a local station down here. It was called Superstars for Wrestling with Joe Pedicino, and it started at 6 o'clock on Saturday night and went to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And it showed Memphis, it showed WCW, it showed WWF, Texas, World Class, Mid South, Memphis. And then usually the last hour was Japan or Puerto Rico. So I grew up a fan, and I really got into the Von Erichs and those guys, and I just had this vision in my mind of this great life where you just travel from town to town, like a bunch of gypsies, and I just made up my mind that somehow, some way, or somehow I was going to get into it, and that's where it started.
Right. So it was something that was, as soon as you saw it, it was something that was in your system, and you probably couldn't get it out of your system until you finally did it. What was it that, how did you go about finding your way into the business?
Well, I was a pretty good basketball player, so I had a chance to go play at a small junior college close by. So I did that, but I after I got out of there, I started working at a furniture store, and some guys in town had been trained, and they were running a small show. And I finally just got up the nerve to go over there and walked in and, started training, and, I guess the rest is history. But it was just, I finally got up the nerve to go over there where they were training at. And it turns out I knew a couple of them. So, they kind of brought me on in.
Cool. So, I guess the training experience is it could be different for everybody in the wrestling business. I've had a few people on the show; their experiences have all been very different. But you go through this process. Do you have a story about the first time you actually got in the ring and had your first match?
Oh yeah. My story is probably a lot different than most people. I went there to train that night, and I actually knew a couple of guys there, and I started talking to him, and this big dude, I mean, like my size, come walking in, and kind of a tough guy, who's this? And they introduced me, and he said, "So you want to be a pro wrestler?" Huh? I said, "Yes, sir. I do. I'd like to." And he just backs up in the corner, unbuttons his shirt, and says, "Chop me." So I'm thinking to myself, I've seen it 1,000 times. I can do this. So I just threw the weakest chop that I could, and he turned me around. He chopped me 3 times, and after that, nobody ever had to tell me, how to chop again. But we trained in an old warehouse kind of place, which is probably typical. But then they lost that place, so we went and trained for a while in his backyard. He lived out in sticks too, so we're out there in the sweltering heat, mosquitoes biting us and everything. And then when it got cold, couldn't really train outside anymore. So we moved to an actual barn that actually had pigs and cows and stuff. We put a tarp up so we could, when the smell wasn't so bad. But we trained in that for a while till the weather got good again. And, then we were back outside. But my first match was my first match was actually the guy that trained me, James Hammonds. That was my first match in Heflin, Alabama. I was so scared. I was wearing a big leather jacket, and I was so scared. I was the baby face, and I was going down the aisle, and people were trying to shake my hand. I was scared to death. I didn't shake anybody's hand. I got in the ring. My head was down the whole time. It was one of those things where, God, let me get through this. But, it just that as time went on, it got a lot easier.
I can imagine, but yes, that's kind of a similar story to a lot of people for their first match. Sometimes it can go even really, really bad, but as long as you got through it, then that's okay. Early in your career, you worked with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I just wanted to ask you, what would you say that you learned the most from working for Mr. Jim Cornette?
The Smoky Mountain was what I thought wrestling would be. That was the kind of the ideal I had. I remember when I first got into the business, my goal was if I could just make $500 a week doing this and not have to work a real job, I would be a total success in my mind. And I did a lot better than that, thankfully. But that place was just, if you couldn't figure it out up there, then, you probably wasn't going to get it. Because not only did you have Jim Cornette, who I think is still, one of my mentors. You had guys like Tracy Smothers, Dirty White Boy, Ricky and Robert, Tommy Rich, Brad, all the Armstrongs, and those guys were so willing to teach you, And there was a lot of young guys that came out of there, myself, Glenn Jacobs, Kane, Al Snow, New Jack Mustafa, Adam Baum went through there. There were just so many guys that went through there as a stepping stone, which, I think that's really what Jimmy wanted to be. I know he wanted to make tons of money at it, but at the same time, he wanted to create new stars, and he did there for a whole, basically a whole generation of guys came out of there. But I don't know, man. To say who I learned most from, it would be hard to say. But probably because Jim Cornette, I was a part of his stable, his army. So it was me, him, Tommy Rich, Buddy Landale, another guy, Buddy Landale. We were in the stable, and it was just so easy to learn. And Cornette was with me all the time, so. Between Cornette and Tommy Rich, because I rode with Tommy Rich from Georgia, we would make the trips together, and we'd usually pick up Brad Armstrong and he'd ride with us. So riding with those two and then working working with Tommy as a partner and working against Brad on, a lot of nights of the week. Hell, you got to learn something.
Exactly. It's all.
I'm sorry. I'm at Terry Gordy. I can't forget Terry. Terry Gordy is one of my favorites of all time. And I got to work with him and tag with him. And, unfortunately it was later on after he had the stroke, but, man, he was still just, even at part throttle, man, he was just wide open. He stand on the outside. It was so cool because, I don't think it's any secret after he had the stroke, it kind of slowed his speech down a little bit. And, but there was one night there and Jimmy just got him, fired. Come on, let me see that old Terry Gordy. And he went nuts in the ring and cleared the ring. I'm standing on the outside thinking, holy shit, this is my hero in here, And, so, yeah, between those guys, if you couldn't learn, you wasn't going to learn.
Absolutely. I always say things like that. It's mathematical. If you add yourself plus a Brad Armstrong over several days of a month, there's no way you're not going to get any better. You know, it's going to help.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know, people say, well, he didn't get much better. No, I really did, because I was green. I mean, I was really green at that time. You know, I watched some of my stuff back from Smoky Mountain. And it's, you know, I'm sitting there like cringing. It's like, oh God, I didn't know I was that bad. You know, but I'll tell you how I got there. I started in, I didn't start, but about 6 months into the business, I got with the same guys that had that same wrestling, that 6 or 8 hour wrestling block on Saturday nights. Joe Pedicino still had the wrestling show. And one of the promotions on it, it was Memphis, Smoky Mountain, and it was North Georgia Wrestling. It was local, live Atlanta. So I went up there, got a pretty good push up there. New Jack and Mustafa, that's where I met those two. We got to be friends. And when they went to Smoky Mountain, you know, they told Cornette, hey, there's a big kid down there and he does a great leg drop, because I was doing the flying leg drop it was finished even back then. So when they came to Cornette would come down and he would do a show in Cobb County Civic Center in Georgia. And he would usually have at least one WWF guy. I think one time they had Randy Savage against, you know, one of the Smoky Mountain guys. But it was always, Lex Luger was there one time. So it was usually a pretty good draw, and everybody wanted to be on it, you know, that was in North Georgia. So New Jack Mustafa were on it there a couple of times. And I guess it came my turn, because I was the heavyweight champion at the time. They were giving me a really good push. So me and a guy named Lee Thomas, who's just a phenomenal worker around here in Georgia, we went out and we had a pretty good match, and I hit the leg drop. And I mean, you know, I was still young then. I got some good height on it. And I came to the back, and Jack had told, you know, Jimmy, hey, you need to watch this kid. And sure enough, he did. And I came back. He said, I've never seen the leg drop that good outside of Bobby Eaton. And I took that as a damn compliment. And I said, well, yes, sir. And made a trip to Puerto Rico real quick, and then I came back and I got a phone call from Jimmy. He said, hey, I want to bring you in. So
that is super cool to hear, and that is a great compliment, because you know, there weren't many better than Bobby Eaton, that's for sure. In my research, I found this to be quite interesting. Just wanted to see what your thoughts were on it. Some may not know this, but in my research, it states that in 1996, you wrestled 2 matches in ECW as one half of the Dark Riders with Bad Boy Billy Black, working with the Eliminators. What was the experience at the ECW arena like for you?
So this was after Smoky Mountain shut down, and Cornette had told me, they said, hey, listen, kid, keep working, and I'll try to get you a job up there. And of course, you know, sorry, my bull here's horning in on me. So I was off that time, and a good friend of mine, Ted Allen, wrestled as he was actually one of the original Nightmares. I think actually before Buddy Wayne came along. I think it was him and Danny Davis for a minute down here in Georgia. I think it was always the other two in Memphis. But, yeah, he was keeping me alive and I was doing okay on indie bookings because I had that Smoky Mountain rub. But Ted was keeping me alive moving jobs. And Billy Black, great worker. His second generation worker. You can find him a lot of stuff over in Paul me. He wanted me and Joe was I couldn't make the shot, couldn't make it. And he said, hey, you want to go to ECW with me? And I said, yeah. I mean, because that was the hot thing at the time, you know. And I was like everybody else. Hell, I want to go there. But you know, it was after the thing with New Jack, and I knew that Jimmy and Paul, you know, had a little friction, or you know, I don't know really what it was. But anyway, they weren't on great terms at the time. So I did call Jim Cornette and I said, hey, is it gonna, you know, be a thing, you know, if I go up there and work? And he said, absolutely not. Go up there and take his money. And I said, all right. So me and Billy went up there, and yeah, we did a house show, and I think we did a handicap match against I think it was Ian or Axel Rotten. And then and I actually met Rey Mysterio. I think he was probably 17 at the time, maybe. I mean, he was still young. Met Rey Mysterio that weekend, but we went up and then we had the match with the Eliminators, and I pulled. If anybody can ever get a hold of the whole match, man, I pulled out every move. I did like a huge elbow drop off the top, big leg drop. I did skin the cat back over, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I pulled it all out, and Paulie liked it. And he was planning on bringing us back. So, Cornette had promised me that that I would he would try to get me a job. And I got home, and I'd been home a couple of weeks, but the plan was to bring us back at the next taping, I guess. I got home, I got a call from Cornette, and answered the phone. He said, well, you ready to go to work, kid? And I said, what do you mean? He said, there's a contract in the mail coming to you. And I said, you kidding me? He said, nope. I said, how'd you do that? I mean, it was just a little bit of a surprise. And he said, Vince at TV, and I told him, I said, hey, that big kid I told you about had Smoky Mountain. He said, yes. He said he went over to work for Paulie this weekend. He said, sign him. So that's how, kind of roundabout way got my contract with Vince. But I have to tell you, it was actually, I thought about it for a while. Not too long, but I mean, I did have to sit and think about it. And because I didn't know at the time, Vince likes to make his own stars. He loves the fact that he can say that he built you from scratch. But on the other hand, there was there was an opportunity for me to go to ECW and probably, make a name for myself there, and then maybe, jump, of course, after everything went down. But, but yeah, ECW was great, man. I really had to think about it because, at the time that was the cool thing. And, most people wanted to be there. And it was, and there again, New Jack and Mustafa were there. So, as soon as Billy called him up and said, hey, he works down here with us in Georgia, you can ask Jack and Mustafa. Of course, they said, yeah, bring him up. So, yeah, that's the ECW story, I guess.
Very cool. And I love how that kind of blended into you going to the World Wrestling Federation. And I wanted to ask you about this 15th of September 1996 in Nashville at a house show. You take on Freddie Joe Floyd, who many may know as Tracy Smothers. In my research, this was the first time that you worked on a WWF show. If it's true, please tell me about the experience, and how you think it went.
Oh yeah, it's true. So I signed with they sent me I guess I think looking back on it, I mean I think a couple of guys might have been getting a little help down in Smoky Mountain. I think maybe Glenn did, or I know that Smoky Mountain was a feeder system for WWE also. But Jerry had the relationship with him for years, so I think actually maybe me, Dwayne Johnson, Rocky, and Bart Sawyer might have been the first developmental guys the WWE ever had. They gave us, I think it was maybe $500 a week, which at the time was a lot more than I was making. So, but we went down to Memphis, but Memphis didn't have the full, they didn't have the training facility, and you went down there and you kind of learned on the job if you didn't know. But at that time, Rocky had worked a couple of matches. I'd been working for a couple of years then. And, Bart, I think he'd been working, 4, 5, 6 years at the time. He was a friend of Roddy Piper. And of course, Roddy at that time was still with New York. And so, he kind of helped get Bart in. So we all went down there we all showed up and got to know each other down there. But yes, they were in Nashville. There was a house show coming to Nashville, Tennessee. And Lawler come to me backstage at TV and said, hey, you're on the Nashville house show. And I said, oh, hell, that's great. And, but I didn't know who I was working. And I got there, and Tracy, Freddie Joe Floyd, Tracy came up to me and said, "Hey, brother, we're working." You can't believe the weight that came off my back, because I'd worked with Tracy 1,000 times in Smoky Mountain. I knew his deal, and he knew mine. So yeah, but we went out there, and from what I can remember, we had a pretty good match. But yeah, it was my first time, and oh man, it was great. Being back. Rene Goulet was still a road agent. Got to meet him, and yeah, just man, it was real cool.
That is cool. I knew that was kind of going to be what the story would be, because every time I've had someone on the show, they always sing the praises of one Tracy Smothers. So good to hear that went well for you. Eventually, you make your TV debut for the WWF under the Truth Commission gimmick with the Jackal Don Callis, Tank, who some may know as Mantar, of course, Kurgan, and Sniper. How did you like working with these guys, and what did you think of the gimmick?
Well, I mean, I was, I thought to myself when we first started to be a South African soldier, I was like, well, that's a stretch, but that's what you do in this business. You kind of adapt to whatever they need. And so we all met up in New York at the old training facility where I think there's some videos out there of Mark Henry training there, and his old warehouse where they made all the props, and they had a ring set up out there, and Dr. Tom Pritchard was doing training. So we went up there, and actually before Don Callis, it was Robin Smith was the original commandant. The deal was Bret went over to South Africa and made a Sinbad episode. And Robin was a part. He was a voice guy, and he was an actor, and he was actually fairly popular in South Africa. And they met on the set, and got hanging out a little bit. And they cooked up this idea, from what I understand, it kind of, they talked about it. It was actually based on the South African Truth Commission, which was set up after apartheid to investigate all the atrocities that occurred. Well, the wrinkle on that is it was as corrupt as the day is long. Everybody knew it. It was just blatantly obvious it was corrupt. So that was the whole idea behind the gimmick, that, we were just corrupt. So we went up there, and Robin actually was in the military, so he taught us how to march and do the whole thing. And then they sent us down to Memphis, and they gave us a great push down there. Me and Kurgan won the tag belts a few times. But we were down there, and we were like, oh, when are we gonna go up? And then finally they brought us up. I think we did a shotgun Saturday night. I don't know if it was a dart. I think it was a shotgun Saturday night. We did, and then they were going to bring us back up, and I got a call from Mantar, and he said, "Hey man, what's the deal?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I don't have a ticket. I'm not going." And be honest with you, I never really found out what happened there because they let him go shortly after. But this was Bret Hart's gimmick, and Mantar had met Owen Hart. He had worked over in Germany, and so had actually the guy that replaced him. But he had done some stuff over there in Germany between Mantar and that time, and he'd met Owen Hart over there. And I think when Bret was, trying to fight, Kurgan had trained over at Bret's place, over at Stu's place. I think he trained there some. So he already knew him. So of course, the Giant Killer. And then Owen said, "Well, hey, I worked with Mantar over in Germany. So okay, there we got that guy." And then from what I understand, I guess you'd have to ask Bret. They were just kind of looking through some photos and stuff, and I popped up in there. And at the time, I had the little GI haircut, and he said, he's perfect for it. So, but we get down there, and then finally we get the call up, and then somehow, whatever happened with that with Mantar, but we get to the arena that day, and we get introduced to Luke Poirier, who had been a huge star over in Germany for Otto once as Rambo. So he did a dark match. I think he did a dark match one week, and then the next week he was our other member. And so actually, when we finally got on TV, most people never saw Mantar. If you watch Shotgun Saturday Night, I think there's a match 2 on there. But by the time I tell you, like I said, you got to look at the timeline of this whole thing. Brett was our benefactor. This was his gimmick. This was his ideal. And, he's the one that carried it to Vince. Vince liked it. But that was right at the time that the Montreal deal went down.
Right.
So we knew, I think we already knew that Brett was leaving. I think we knew, or at least we knew that he was talking, to Bischoff. So, once that went down, we were like, okay, where does this leave us? And, we had a little bit of a run, but I looking back on it, it was that Survivor Series, 97 Survivor Series was gang warfare. So, we had all the factions. We had the Nation, we had the Disciples, the Bikers, we had the Boricuas, the Puerto Ricans, and, of course, us, the racists. So, it was great for the Survivor Series, but, going after that, we were kind of like, and they brought Don in, and Don, he had the long hair, and then, I'm pretty sure he'd been willing to cut it, but he took us in another direction, and like the paramilitary, which we had been, he took us in kind of the cult direction, which I thought was a great ideal, and because we had to do something a little different. But about that point, we were all like, okay, this might be running its course. I don't know how much how much legs this is gonna have under it. But we stretched it out for a little bit. So and the guys were the best. I guess when it's all because that was the first time I was really on the road with WWF, and that was the same for all of us. So we were all kind of figuring it out as we went along. But man, we would have a great time. We'd ride together. We stayed the same places. So, and we just hung out together. So, all those guys were great. And it was actually a good time.
That's cool to hear. Yes, but I mean, it must still at the time be so exciting. You're on television. You're doing this gimmick. You get to perform in a 15-team battle royal at WrestleMania, which is actually yours and Luke or Sniper's final time as the Truth Commission. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your team with Luke Poirier after the Truth Commission, where you teamed as Armageddon. You worked 2 tapings of Shotgun Saturday Night against the Quebecers in Long Island and Dave Weber and Nick Barbary in Albany, New York. But then Armageddon was no more in the WWF. I'm really interested to know where the idea came from and what happened.
So, we kind of knew that they were spinning off Don and Kurgan on their own. So we just kind of thought up I think Don, Don talked to Vince Russo a lot, which we did too. But Don talked to him a lot. I don't know how much of it was actually input for them, because a lot of the stuff we just kind of, hey, what if we did this, and so they gave us a little bit of freedom there to try to make something new. So we went down the road that once Don and Kurgan turned on me and Luke, that we were he was portraying the cult leader, which I think was doing well. He was portraying the cult leader, so we portrayed it like a cult, and 2 members that had got away from it and were trying to tell everybody else that, hey man, this dude's loony and he's got this monster to take care of his heavy work. So, and we was trying to think a name for it, and be honest with you, I don't know really who come up with it, if it was me or Don or Luke, or if we all came up. Anyway, we came up with Armageddon, end of the world, that kind of thing. So, and Russo, we talked to Russo about it. He actually called us at home. We talked about it, and he liked it. So, we thought we'd give it a run. As far as tagging with Luke, man, he was great. He was he did stuff that I don't see a lot of people do anymore. It was very a classic. I think maybe Edward Carpentier. I don't know if I'm saying that right, from Canada, because Luke was from Montreal. I think maybe he had trained under him a little bit, but he was just a phenomenal worker, and he was so easy to work with. He was such a great guy, so easy to get along with. Yeah, I mean, we once we started really tagging a good bit together, we started really clicking, I think.
Right. So you guys get to do, you go out there a couple of times as this under this new name, Armageddon, but then all of a sudden it's no more. And then you're working in Music City Wrestling and OVW. So you just had all this time where you're on television, and now you're kind of back to OVW in this kind of territory. How much hard work did you have to put in to finally get, given another shot to get back on WWF television?
Well, I just, Howard Finkel handled travel back then. And, I didn't get tickets. We didn't get tickets for 1 week. And then we didn't get tickets for the other week. Of course, and I'm calling, Howard says, no, we don't have anything, any tickets for you this week. So I'm starting to see the writing on the wall. And I said, okay. So at the time, I weighed about 270 pounds. I was in really good shape. Of course, I was having to wear a T-shirt. But I said, okay, I'm getting bigger. And so I spent a year. And Jim Cornette, of course, like I said, one of my mentors. Jim Ross was head of I think it was talent relations at the time. He was head of talent relations. And I had a real good relationship with JR. He liked me. So I asked them, I said, hey, look, if I'm not working up there, can I take indie bookings and work around here in Georgia? And, Jimmy called me back. He said, talk JR about it. I don't know if he mentioned it to Vince, but JR said, just don't get hurt. And I said, promise I won't. So I just started, taking indie bookings, and Bill Bearings was a good friend of mine. And we'd work together here in Georgia a lot. So him and Bert Prentice from Tennessee were doing Music City Wrestling. And I would go up there with Bill. And then Bill was running a few towns here in Georgia. But we'd do the TV up there. So I did that, and I just hit the gym even harder. Packed on a little bit more muscle, changed my look a little bit. And yeah, I was working as much as I could. I mean, I was making money doing it, but I had to run as Truth Commission. So I was on TV, but I wasn't Shawn Michaels, or those, but it was keeping, it was a nice little extra with what WD, they were still paying me, I was still under contract with them, and, but yeah, I was just working as much as I could. I worked for worked for Bert and Bill down in Georgia, worked for Mike Jackson over in Alabama. Just worked as much as I could, So, yeah, I mean, it was hard. I'd say it was hard work because, they say if you love what you do, and you never work a day in your life. And, from start to finish, the days I was in wrestling, I never worked a day in my life.
That's cool to hear. Yes. And, you're working hard to get yourself back on television. You work a dark match against a guy under the name Ruckus, better known as Robbie Rage from WCW's High Voltage Tag Team, on February 21st, 2000 in the Georgia Dome. This is finally an opportunity to be seen again and get back on TV. After this time away, when you come back, you work this dark match. I'm assuming that they're impressed with the changes that you've implemented in your body.
Well, yeah, and so Georgia Dome was here. I live in Georgia, so that was close. But in the meantime, I had been working for Jim for not a lot of year. Like I said, they're getting a check. But Jim Monet called me and explained that he had bought a portion of WZWA Danny Davis down there. He said, "I did give me back to me. I'm all ears." And he said, "Bull Buchanan." And I said, I sounded, and he did. And he said, "The story is you've had the most aggravated assaults in the history of Kentucky. Modern policing in Kentucky, you've had the most aggravated." So yeah, I was a prisoner on work release. Kenny Bolin, who worked there and was one of Cornette's right-hand guys, had got me out on work release, and they brought me out to the ring in handcuffs and prison attire.
Right.
So, when I got the call up back to the main roster, I assumed that I would be doing the same thing. But when I got up there, I was a prison guard. So, go figure. But yeah, I worked. I went down there and worked on the gimmick, and then they had me as prison guard. But yeah, I think it was 1999. I was in OVW. We did some pretty entertaining stuff down there. But they would lead me out in handcuffs. I'd break out of the handcuffs, and I was down there with Rico Constantino. Of course, Rob Conway was still there. Nick Dinsmore was there. Damager, who's one of the Basham brothers. Doug Basham was there. So there's a lot of young guys there. It was a lot of fun, especially seeing them, later on, actually make it up there themselves and get good runs.
Absolutely, yes. And that is quite humorous. You went from being a prisoner to a prison guard. And that's what leads me to the next question. March 19th, 2000, very significant date in your career. It's when you re-debut as Bull Buchanan, siding with the Big Bossman in an attack on Midian. Tell me a little bit about this, and what you learned most from working with Ray Traylor.
Oh God, yeah, I don't know if you got long enough to hear all that. So Cornette calls me, I think on a Tuesday. He says, "Hey, you got to be at TV tomorrow." And I think we taped on Wednesday. So I was, I said, "Yeah, I know. I'm driving up tomorrow morning." He said, "No, you got to be at SmackDown tomorrow night." He said, "You got to have Bossman gear." When Jimmy, when he was laying the whole gimmick out to me, the original Bull Buchanan, my first thought was, "Hey, man, this could lead into actually doing something with Ray Traylor, maybe coming out as his trustee or, something like that." Because I was a huge Ray Traylor fan. And because he's basically from the same part of, Georgia I am. And he was one of those guys that, I saw before I got in the business. I thought to myself, hell, he's from the same place if he could do it, I might be able to do it too. So I get there and, I'm tagging with Ray, and that's actually the first time we met. But tagging him, and man, he was just, I can't tell you what a good guy he was. I've never met anybody that had a bad thing to say about him. And I learned a lot from him, a lot in the ring, but I also learned a lot outside the ring as far as like how to. I still don't, and I know it's a kind of a tagline now, WWE superstars, but at the time, we were superstars. I mean, the business was so huge that, even the guys low rung on the ladder was huge superstars. But, I would go out with him because he would always volunteer to do volunteer stuff. And like the news crews would come before the show. They'd set up and they'd want a couple of interviews. So I'd go out there with him because, man, I really didn't know how to talk really well back then. And I learned a lot. And business wise, I went from, I was making a decent living, pretty good living. But, when I got to run with him and then the run, after the stuff afterwards, man, it's pretty good money. And, he kind of, he got me set up with my own LLC and, incorporated. So, but yeah, but the in-ring stuff, man, he was so smooth in the ring, so smooth. He made it look so easy. And I was really, really disappointed, on the verge of actually being pretty pissed off when they broke us up, because I thought we had, oh shit, man, I could stayed with him, for the next 5 years. But yeah, they had other plans, so yeah. But it was great, and the gimmick, it was kind of easy for me to play, to be honest. And then getting to work alongside him was just, I mean, it was a dream come true.
That's awesome. Because I feel like the run that you had with Bossman was very memorable. And a lot of people might point to that when they think of your career. But you two were actually only a team on television for 78 days before the split. Did you ever find out what the reason was for it? Because from my memory, he didn't really do a whole lot storyline wise on television after they split the team up. So did you ever find out why they wanted to split it when everything was going great?
Well, yeah, because first, Ray told me. Ray was the one that told me. And I was just, I was like, why would they do that? I thought we were having, he said, no, he said, I got to take some time off. I got to have my knees scoped and a couple of other things. He said, and they're looking at you as to give you a singles push. So, I mean, that made it a little better, but I was still like, I was really kind of bummed out about it. But, yeah, because that, in between, when we broke up and before the RTC started, I did the thing where I stole Undertaker's motorcycle.
Yeah.
Actually, the Shane Man at one of the pay-per-views, maybe it had the huge swing. It's where Shane dove off the top of one of the Titantrons or something on the big show, I think. And King of the
might have been Backlash.
Yeah, King of the not King of the Ring. Yeah, Backlash. But then I worked Crash Holly at King of the Ring. I think it was it. And I'm sorry, I'm having to get my plug. My phone's about to die. Okay. I worked him, so yeah, and I worked Jericho on TV also. So yeah, they were talking about giving me a singles push, and the RTC thing came up.
Right. Yeah, because it felt like you were being used as a bit of a henchman for the McMahon Helmsley stable, which is when you actually stole Undertaker's motorbike. It never actually ended in a singles match between the two of you taking place, which I thought was a bit strange. But this short period of helping out the regime and then being out on your own, then, of course, as we're getting to now, being placed with Stephen Richards in the Right to Censor. Again, this is a bit of a change again. What did you think of the idea when it was presented to you?
Well, at first, I wasn't too impressed. But so I think we were in Albany, New York, and I'd actually got to be friends with Stevie, even though we hadn't really worked together. And I was a huge fan of him in ECW. But he saw me backstage, and well, actually, one of the production people met me backstage and said, "Hey, what size shirt do you wear?" So I thought we were getting some free swag or something. So I said, "Oh, I think." He says, "What's your next size?" And then I started, I was 19, something like that. He said, "Okay." And then like not 10 seconds after he walked off, Stevie come walking up to me. He says, "Hey man, what do you think about it?" And I said, "About what?" He said, "They're putting me and you together." And it didn't dawn on me at first. I was like, "Wow, that's great, man." Because I like Stevie and I would have loved to have worked with him. And he said, I said, "So what are we doing?" He said, "That thing I've been doing, coming out." I said, What's it supposed to be?" And then he laid it all out to me. It was Vince's way of, poking the PTC, the Parent Teacher Council. So he kind of laid it out to me and told me what, kind of at that time, how things change. But, the plan, yeah, he just explained to me what it was about. And it dawned on me. I said, holy shit, man, these people are really going to be PO'd, if we take away. And it, like a light bulb went on. That's what you want. And so that's how it started. Of course, it was me and him. And then we got Charles, Godfather. And, funny story about that. I get, it's pretty well known, he wasn't a big fan of the gimmick. Yeah. And I couldn't blame him. He went from being absolutely one of the most popular guys in the whole company, to just, being a jerk like the rest of it. I was used to it because I was already a jerk. I'd never been a good guy there. So, but, and I mean, he lost a lot of merchandise money too. Because he was doing really, really good on merchandise. So, and then we got Val, and there again, I think Val was with it a lot more than Godfather was, but we got to Houston, I think it was Houston, I'm not sure. Anyway, we got to the building, excuse me, and Stevie kind of met me coming in and says, "Hey," he said, "You heard what they're doing?" I said, "No, what are we doing?" He said, "They're bringing the Godfather in with us." I said, "You kidding me?" And the first thing in my mind, because, I kind of knew Charles back then, I said, "What does he think about this?" And it's so comical because Stevie just kind of pointed around the corner, and I stuck my head around the corner, and I see Vince there, and there was Charles, Godfather. And you could just tell by the hand motions, he was curating. He was telling Vince, what was on his mind, I guess. And I could tell Vince was, Vince trying to talk him into it. So, real happy about it. And we had the match for the one match. I mean, Charles a 300-pound guy, but he could go. I mean, he's no joke. I mean, he's a legit tough guy. And I tell us a little more sizzle with everyone he threw it. I felt it a little more. I get it. And actually, turned out to be really, really good friends during that time, which thankful for. But yeah, we had the match for the girls and we lost. There was so much heat in that arena. That's the one thing that say what you want to about us, but it had heat. I mean, like real, like they hated us, and I can't blame them. And even the music, that was so annoying. And I guess you can probably watch it on YouTube, but just being there, you can't imagine how much heat there was in that building every time we came out. So, and we had a real good one, got to hold the titles from the Godfather. And, back that time, too, I mean, you got to think, man, there was some great tag teams. The Hardy Boys, the Dudley, Edge and Adam, Christian, and
APA.
We had a lot of good tag teams. Ron and John, the APA, which that was probably, I worked with those guys more than anybody, probably between me and Bossman and RTC, the RTC. We were working with those guys every night, so got to be good friends with those guys, which was really cool.
So I've only got a couple more questions to go here. And I really, again, Bull, I've appreciated your time so much. I think WrestleMania 17 is probably the greatest pay-per-view of all time, in my opinion. And it's such an interesting time in the business. You've had this great run with the right to censor, tag team champion. ECW is gone. WCW has just been bought by the WWF. You're in the Astrodome in Houston with Val and Charles against Taz in the APA. So this is a really loaded question here, and it sounds perhaps a little dramatic as well, but you're kind of at the peak of your career right here in the WWF. WCW is getting purchased, which means the roster is about to probably double in size. You have a spot that you have to worry about. From my research, you actually perform on television 9 more times after this WrestleMania as the invasion angle kicks off. So there's quite a lot here. How were you feeling at the
time? So we had the meeting that day, and Vince explained to us, that he had bought WCW. I didn't have any idea. I don't think most of us did. He'd bought WCW, and it was a good feeling, I guess. Because we really were in a war with those guys, and all it would have taken is a really bad breaks, like Taker leaving or Shawn leaving, jumping ship, and we would have been in real trouble. But it was satisfying from the fact that we won. But from a business standpoint, from our side of it, and I was sitting in the meeting with Ron Simmons, and I remember Ron kind of saying something alluding to the fact that, oh boy, here we go. But you don't even see anybody lose their job, and plus, that was a bargaining chip for a lot of guys. I never used it. I don't know if I was in a position, to use it or not. But when you can say, hey, I'm drawing money for you, but I think you ought to pay me more. Well, we can't do that. Okay, well, I'll go talk to Eric Bischoff. Well, hold on a second. And plus, it was another whole roster of guys from top to bottom, that they could make a living, a very good living, but at very least a living. So we knew the guys were coming over. We knew the things were going to change. I don't know that the RTC was going to last a whole lot longer, but I kind of thought we rushed it a little bit because we were just rolling along kind of, and boom, we were doing. But at the same time, had to get those guys. I mean, how do you have Booker T on your TV show? How do you not have Arn Anderson, Fit Finley, those guys behind things, and Fit in front of the camera? You're not going to not. But I had actually, because we all kind of knew, hey, sorry. So I had actually pitched the gimmick, and, I don't want to get a bunch of hate for it because he does it way better than I have had any idea of doing it. But it was, I really like the Waylon Mercy character. It was before I was there, but I liked the movie Cape Fear, and that was where the Waylon Mercy gimmick came from. But from what I understand, Danny just, he had some injuries and stuff, and couldn't do it. I pitched it to Michael Hayes. Michael was the guy that, we came from the same area. and I ran across him, even back on the Indies when I first started. So we knew each other, and I trusted him. I pitched it to Michael, and he said, "Yeah." And I think he pitched it to Vince, and he said, "Yes, but we got to make it modern. We got to update it because the Wail of Mercy, that Danny did, the white pants, flowery shirt, everything." So I kind of started, trying to get some ideas together on that, and after the invasion angle, the tickets quit coming, and so you're like, "Oh God, here we go." So, but yeah, I pitched that to him, and I knew, once we were off the road, I called JR up and I said, "Hey, and at that time, I was getting paid a lot better than I did the first time to sit at home, but I also knew that, hey, people aren't going to pay you just to sit around." And doing the Indies wasn't really an option at that point. We'd got a little beyond where we were a few years before that. So I called JR up and said, "Hey, would you care if I drove down to OVW?" And, he said, "No, absolutely not. I mean, yeah, go down there if you got something you want to work on." So I called Jimmy and I told him the idea, and he said, "Heck yeah, come on down here." He liked the idea, and he we kind of did the little bit of the gimmick down there. I worked with David Flair when he was there. And the coolest part of that is I got to be there and see probably the great, I think it's probably one of the greatest classes that ever came out. It's Randy Orton, John Cena, Dave Bautista, Shelton Benjamin, Brock Lesnar, all those guys were down there and learning at that time. So that was really cool. Got to know those guys. And
Okay, Bull. So the next portion of your career, I wanted to talk about, as you mentioned, your time in OVW working on this new gimmick that you had suggested. You've been working a bunch of house shows in mid-2002 with Mike Awesome, Ron Waterman, Farouk, Rico, a couple of dark matches. Finally, you do get back on television. August 4th, 2002, Richmond, Virginia, Velocity against Mike Awesome. At this stage, it's been 418 days, since your last appearance on TV. And this was Mike Awesome's fourth last WWE match, because I'm a nerd for facts like that. But you come back, you're in tremendous shape. I mean, this is the first time we see you in WWE without your shirt on. And when I saw the video the other day, I was like, my God, he's in the best shape of his career. Please tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so I really didn't have a gimmick at the time. I was just Bull Buchanan, so I figured it'd be a good chance to get rid of the shirt and So I had leaned down a little bit. I'd usually stay around 290. I was down to about 270 pounds, and yeah, I got to work Mike Awesome, which was a bucket list thing for me because I watched Mike in FMW and All Japan. And I watched him in, of course, his stuff in ECW, and I just thought our styles would mesh well together. We were both big guys, about the same size. Our move repertoire was a lot of the, he did a lot of high flying stuff for a guy his size. I did too, and I thought we had a good match. Mike had just come back from. I know one knee, possibly two big knee injuries. So, he was still trying to, kind of get back on his feet. I really, and we'd actually, got to be friends and talked a little about, maybe tagging something. It never worked out. Well, it didn't in WWE. Later on in Japan, we did get that tag a little bit, but yeah, Mike was really cool, and I thought we had a good match, and got to kind of do it the way we wanted to do it. But yeah, it was getting my foot back in the door on TV. Like I said, it really wasn't a gimmick; it was just kind of me. But gave them a chance to see what I'd been doing while I was off.
Yeah, really cool. And I know, I believe a few weeks later, you did work Albert as well on Velocity for another victory for yourself.
Yep.
But then there's a big space here of 3 months of being on the road doing house shows, working with some may consider obscure kind of names that you wouldn't think of. Horace Hogan was actually working a lot of house shows. And you actually teamed with him in his very last match of his career against Mark Henry and Mark Jindrak in Colorado. He also worked a bit with your old buddy from OVW, Doug Basham, Lenny Lane from WCW. You actually wrestled John Cena in San Jose, Rodney Mack, Eric Angle, Bill DeMott. These are some just names that I wanted to throw out there. Everyone's hoping to get called up. Everyone wants to get called up to TV. And you're going to get called up. You're going to get called up to be backing up John Cena as B Squared. So please, the floor is yours. Please tell me a little bit about this and how there was also another idea in the pipeline of being Jamie Noble's cousin.
So I think maybe it was Hunter or somebody that had come up with the idea of being Jamie Noble's cousin, which I thought was a great idea. It kind of fit right into who I was. I mean, Jamie was from West Virginia, but it's still kind of the same part of the country for us. We're all from the South. We all kind of talk the same. We all use the same, funny little phrases. So, but Paulie was the head writer at SmackDown, and Paul and I had developed a relationship over the years from me working in ECW that one time, and I'd always stayed in touch with him. So he was concerned that I might get lost in the mix with Jamie and Nydia, who had great chemistry at the time, and he was afraid I might be the odd man out. So I literally was at TV one day, and it was one of the writers came by and just told me, "Hey, we're putting you with Cena," and I had known John. I had known John for a while because we'd worked in OVW together. And he had been on the road doing dark matches, same as me. And I'd actually met him a few years earlier. A lot of these guys, when they're trying to get in at that time, when we would go to their part of the country, which, for him was California, they would get a dark match. And then when we'd come back, 6 months, 4 months, whatever later, they would get a dark match again. So, I saw his first one. And then I saw his second, and there was always improvement, and he was always getting better. And once I got down there and listened to him on the mic, I knew he was just John Cena, just like I was kind of Bull Buchanan. So once I saw him start doing the rapper thing, so I kind of knew what where we were going, but I wasn't sure how they wanted it approached. Did they want it approached as a as a bodyguard, in slacks and maybe a black shirt, something like that, a suit, the classic bodyguard. And Shelton Benjamin, me and Devon Dudley had been riding together, and Devon had just went back with Bubba. So Shelton Benjamin was, in the same boat, just doing dark matches, really not a gimmick. So Shelton and I had been riding at the time, and so we kind of kicked it around and went out to a mall and I found some Rough Rider pants and the wife beater and a little bit of bling and so I thought it would be funny, and John did too. We approached it as this typical Southern redneck, overnight turned into part of his entourage, a bodyguard, so to speak. So yeah, we had a lot of it was different, and I was having fun with it because it was something different from what I'd always done. Vince had always saw me as a killer, and this was a little different. And like I said, I had leaned down a little bit, so but yeah, we were having a good time with it. And I think the crowd was too. We were heels, but it was so over the top, Vanilla Ice. It was actually funny. And we didn't have a long run together, which I knew about about 3 weeks in, I knew that, I mean, you know, this guy he isn't going to need an entourage around him for long. And I had, you know, I had kind of known that they were really wanting to push him hard. And from knowing him and from seeing the improvements he made from the first dark match I ever saw him in,
yeah,
through OVW, getting to work with him in OVW, and you know, one of the drills that Danny and Jim Cornette would do with the guys is everyone would sit in the crowd, and one guy would get in the ring, and another guy would take the mic and interview him. And the drill was that whoever had the mic, and sometimes the people from the audience, would come up with an idea for impromptu promo. No thinking about it, no, just, and the topic could be anything that, you know. And I saw John Cena do a 2 to 3 minute promo out of the blue on a flying squirrel. I knew then that if I ever put the mic in his hand, he'd be a star. And you know, when they did, of course, you know, the ball started rolling. So yeah, I had a feeling that you know, it wasn't going to be a long partnership, because he really didn't need anybody at that time. He was ready to go on his own. You know, and that kind of left me in, okay, how do I spin this into something I can do, or something that, you know, I can spin it out of? And, you know, never really got the chance to do that. Yeah, I'd been there for 8 years at the time, and you know, it had several different gimmicks, and I think they thought, and I, you know, I really kind of thought too, it might be, as JR used to say, it might be time to go away for a while and learn a new hold.
Yeah.
And so I think it was in January, John Laurinaitis called me and told me, you know, hey, you know, we're not going to, but to his credit, he, you know, I think he got me on the Royal Rumble that year, which was, you know, a good little payoff. Yeah. I didn't do much, but still, it was a good pay. You know, and knowing that I was probably getting ready to leave, you know, I thought that was a pretty class thing to do. And I still had a few months left on my contract, and he paid it out for me. He didn't have to do that, but they did. So, you know, I've never had I never will. I've never had a bad thing to say about the WWE. They always did what they said they would do. The checks were always there. I had a good relationship with everybody. I never had can't really look back on it and say that I ever had a bad day at work while I was there, you know. As far as, you know, there's always hassle, you know, flight gets delayed, you know, your rental car is not there, you know, there's always stuff like that. But as far as working with the company, even to this day, you know, I went down a few months ago and did a guest coaching thing. Oh, cool. They've always been first class, always, you know, done what they said they would do. And it's, you know, it's always been a really good relationship.
Yeah, well, that's really cool to hear. And thank you for sharing all that. And, you know, another question that I had to ask is, you know, 8 years later, after you departed the company on the 14th of November, 2011, you made that surprise one-night return for John Cena's This Is Your Life segment, where you had claimed that John had ruined your life. I found it very entertaining. It must have been really fun for you after all that time to come back and do this spot on this show.
It was. And, you know, there again, like it usually happens with them, you know, just out of the blue, I got a call from Laurinaitis, and he asked, you know, if I would be available, you know, maybe for the next week. And I said, sure, you know. And I immediately went and asked my son, Ben, who's now Brooks Jensen in NXT, where Raw was at the next week. And he said Boston. And I said, got it. I had a feeling what it might be, and John called me back a day or two later and confirmed it. And yeah, they flew me up and you know, kind of laid the whole thing out, and it was really cool, because I got to see a lot of guys I hadn't seen in a while, and I got to meet a lot of guys that I hadn't got to meet that, you know, were up there. You know, the mid. You know, of course, I tried to meet everybody, but you know, Sheamus and some of those guys, I had been watching and, really look forward to meeting. Got to hang out with them and actually got to hang out with Rocky for a little while too. He flew back in for that. I think at that time they were maybe getting ready to build up to WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Build him with John. So he flew in, so I got to see him for a little while, and I hadn't seen him since I'd left, or actually a little before, because I think he left to go to Hollywood actually before I did, before I left. But yeah, and it was Foley. It was I worked with Mick a lot, so yeah, it was really cool. Like I said, when there's, I don't know that you ever actually burn bridge in this business, because if somebody can make money with you, at the end of the day, I mean, we don't like to say it, and it's never really been it's never been about all about the money, but at the same time, and it's one thing I try to impress on these young guys, it has to be a little bit about the money, because you are doing this to make a living. We all do it because we got passion and we love what we're doing, of course. But at the end of the day, it is about providing for yourself and for your family, and but it's never been all about the money. I wouldn't want people to know this, or I wouldn't say it too loud, other than just sometimes you would do it for free. I mean, we all know we would. We've all done it for free before. We've all paid our dues, but yeah, it's I don't think it's hard to burn a bridge, because if they can make money with you, they'll use you. But at the same time, I've always maintained a good relationship. I don't think I've ever had a cross word with anybody up there. And so, when you do that, things like this pop up from time to time. You never know when you're, just like the guest coaching thing. You never know when they're going to call you up and say, hey, could you come in? And so, that's another really cool thing about being associated with them.
Yeah, that is cool. And you did bring up your son, Brooks Jensen. Yeah. This is some great stuff, man. I have to be honest, I've been very entertained by some of the stories that he's been put in, especially when he's looking for love and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How proud are you of him? And do you get a bit of a kick, seeing him perform on NXT?
Oh God. How much time have you got? Yeah. He was just, I've got 4 children. My girls, my 2 girls were older. And they actually, got in the ring a few times and tried it, but it just, wasn't their cup of tea. My youngest son, Zach, who's 16, just got done with the high school wrestling state tournament. He's a football player and a wrestler. Made it to the state finals this year. He's a junior, but he's already had a handful of matches. Oh, cool. So he's looking to kind of follow in footsteps. But yeah, I knew Ben was Ben has been just in love with this business since he was a little kid. He was kind of like me, I guess. I just kind of fell in love with it. So he's all these years, the indie shows and stuff like that. He's always went with me, and at 7 or 8 years old, he was trying to help put up chairs at the indie shows I would go to. He would try to help him set up the ring. He went from that to I think when he was 13 or 14, he approached me and asked me, if I would train him, and I said, I tell you what, we'll train you as a referee, and we'll see how you do. And he refereed for about I made him referee for about a year. And while he was refereeing, I would take him in the ring and, show him a little bit here and there. And I trained him, and he has that first match actually at 16. And he worked, he did most of it. He got himself, I made him, go out and contact promoters. I made him do it all, kind of a grassroots kind of, thing. But he had himself booked every weekend, and I think it was 2019 Evolve. had a show in Atlanta, and William Regal was doing a seminar beforehand, and I really didn't do it. Was all him. You know, he contacted him. He was working at a small feed mill over here in the town we live in, part-time job after school, and he saved up his money. I think it was $200, paid to go to the seminar. And I just kind of hung out. You know, of course, I wanted to see how he did. But while he was in the ring, William Regal came over because we had known each other for a long time and always had a good relationship. So we sat and talked, and he asked me, you know, would he be interested in coming down there? And I'm so sure he would. But really, my idea was for him to continue to work the indies and, you know, maybe get him over to Japan to work to spend a few months in the dojo there. I want him to be well-rounded. You know, I really kind of saw, you know, maybe getting a shot with ROH or Impact or something smaller and kind of, you know, to prepare him for the WWE. But, you know, 2019, that's when COVID hit, and pretty much just, you know, threw a monkey wrench into everything. But Regal actually contacted me in November and said, hey, you know, we'd like to bring Ben in. I know you wanted him to get some more experience and go to Japan, but I think at the time his son was over in Japan, and you know, they weren't doing any more visas. You know, everything was kind of shut down. So he said we could go ahead and bring him in, and you know, and I said, well, you know, give him a call, you know, see what he said. Which I knew what the answer would be. And he went down and had to try out, and you know, I guess the rest is history. He moved down there in late August, and by the early September he was on TV, and you know, they've been running ever since.
Absolutely. And how have you felt about some of the storylines he's been involved with since being on NXT?
Oh, I mean, it's, you know, it's you know, because when we would do these, and he was doing indie shows. He was doing Friday night, Saturday night, sometimes Sunday, you know, occasionally during the week, and I would always go with him because, you know, even though he's as big as I am, but you know, he's still a 17 or 18-year-old, 16-year-old kid. So of course I wanted to go and, you know, make sure everything was, you know, that he didn't get in any situations that, you know, he didn't need to. And so we would talk about this and that, you know, and just like, you know, when you're on the road, you know, that's you're in the car for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at a time. You know, all you do is you sit there and talk. And so we talked about WWE, and I told him, I said, you know, but he had the ideal of the gimmick that he wanted to do when he went down there. But I told him, I said, look, man, you know, you never know. I mean, you could go from being this country boy, you know, you could be you know, whatever. It's just, you know, whatever whim they decide. But he kind of had an idea of what he wanted to do, and for the most part, that's kind of what he's done. And anybody that knows Ben knows that that, you know, the best gimmicks are not gimmicks; they're just extensions of your character. And we joke all the time because this is absolutely an extension of his character. You know, the Brooks Jensen you see on TV is not too far from the Brooks Jensen in real life. I do. I'm pretty sure he has had a kiss before. But you know, I mean, that's kind of Ben, and I think that's why it works for him. And you know, I couldn't have really picked a better partner for him to put him with. You know, other than Josh. I'd watched Josh a little in Evolve, and so had Ben, and I'd really, you know, been a fan of his work, and so you know, I think they've got something that they can, especially, and with Fallon coming in with them too. I think they got something that they could go to the main roster with, and you know, have a good run.
Absolutely, I agree. I've been very entertained by the group. It's been some very good stuff. Bull, again, I want to thank you so much for your time being on the show. I know that there's so much more of your career that took place after your time in WWE. And I'd hate to skim over it. You know what I mean? It kind of feels rude to skim over it because you spent quite a lot of time in All Japan and Noah. So I just wanted to see if you had any stories of your time in Japan and and all the legendary Japanese talent you got to work with.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, actually, like I said, I mean, WWE was a blast and everything, but I probably, I probably felt a lot more. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. I'm very proud of the work I did in Japan because they never approached me with a gimmick or anything like that. All they asked was that I be there and have good matches. So I finally got a chance I could wear trunks. I could, kind of do what I wanted to do, be who I wanted to be, and just go out there and have good matches. And me and D'Lo Brown had been friends since Smoky Mountain. We met down there. We were both living at the Smoky Mountain Flop House, which was in Morristown, Tennessee. I mean, everybody that ever, went through there lived there at one time. And, we came up through the developmental system of WWE together. And we, worked in WWE, WrestleMania. We all got to work together. And when we got over to Japan, we were part of a group called ROD, which was, depending on what time, Taka Michinoku was the head of the group. But the original group was myself, D'Lo, Mike Awesome. Mike Awesome was there. Jerry Toot, he was the Wall in WCW. He passed away, unfortunately. And then Eki Jamal Umaga came in, and Taiokeya, who had been a big star in All Japan. So we all got together as a group. Rosie, superhero in training at one time, was a part of it. But me and D'Lo were kind of always the tag team. So we carried that to Noah and actually got the chance and for a brief moment had the GHC tag belts. And to me at that time, Noah, with its association with ROH, had probably, as far as pro wrestling, the greatest roster of anybody in the world. Marufuji, Segura, of course, Masao was the boss, Ogawa, Kenta, just all those great names, that the people remember from that time. They were all there, and we got to work with them. So, as far as a body of work, if I had to, it'd be hard not to. If I had to, put one picture on the screen and say, "Hey, this is what I did," it would be hard not to put WWE. But I think right there beside of it, I would have to put what we did in All Japan and Noah. As far as my personal feeling, I take as much pride in that as anything I've ever done, because at that time, work rate was just through the roof. I mean, the undercard on most of Noah's, on most of the cards we were on, the undercard were people like Bobby Fish, Eddie Edwards, Brian Danielson, the Briscoes. And not saying they were undercard, but this might be your opening match. So all the ROH guys who were there, were coming over at the time. So to me, we had the greatest talent roster of professional wrestling now, which I kind of differentiate. I look at pro wrestling as what we did until, the mid 80s, late 80s, when Vince coined the term sports entertainment, and he created the sports entertainment genre. To me, they're kind of different because they have a different philosophy of the pro wrestling business model was different than Vince's model. Vince created something totally different. But as far as, and everybody followed that trend. but as far as just, pro wrestling and putting, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star matches together, I think at that time, pro wrestling Noah had the greatest talent roster in the world.
Wow, cool. Well, yes, I just wanted to know a little bit about your time there, because clearly, you're getting to work in Japan, you get to show what you can do in the ring. You're not just like a 7-minute match on Raw or whatever. Like, yeah, you actually get to go out there and show what all your training and all your experience
and I
accumulated to.
Yeah, and I have to say that I had always planned on going to Japan, and that's kind of why when the run in WWE was over, I was disappointed, but I was kind of looking forward to getting over there, because it was something I'd always wanted to do, and man, it was a great time. It was very there was a lot less pressure there than there was in WWE, because the model wasn't necessarily based off of the TV program. And, we really didn't, there weren't skits. There was just, hardcore, just nose to nose, strong style wrestling. And I loved it. We both did, me and D-Lo, we all loved it. When Umaga, when he left to go back, if Vince calls, and this has been the same all throughout history, all the way back through Vince Sr., and Vince Jr., if Vince calls, you're going to go. There's always been one, the main game in town has always been WWE, and it always will be. In the territory days, it was because that Vince Sr. could pay you more, because he had Madison Square Garden. He had the Spectrum in Philadelphia, so if he wanted you, you were going to go. But, it was always a kind of and D-Lo went back, and we talked about it, we talked about it before he left. It's just hard not to go back when they call. But it was also hard to leave Japan for everybody that did. It was a hard decision, because it's just a different lifestyle there. It's, you get off the plane in Narita and you get on a bus, and that's all you got to do. You're not renting cars. You're not trying to find hotel rooms in the middle of the night. You're not, it's a very, it's a very relaxing job over there.
Awesome. That's cool to hear. I wanted to ask you, just before we get to the end here, Bull, you have your time in WWE, you have all this time in Japan, you do some other stuff after Japan. When was there a point in time where you thought to yourself, okay, you know what, maybe it's time to start winding down and maybe doing something else, career-wise? When was that moment, and what made you make that decision?
Actually, it come a few years before I really did anything. We were over in Japan, and somebody had the DVD of the movie The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke that had just come out, and of course we were all dying to see it, and we all watched that movie. And somewhere during the course of watching that movie, I just made up my mind. I said, "This is not going to be me." I said, "This is not going to be," because even though that's a fictional story, unfortunately, it's a story that, and everybody that's associated with pro wrestling knows, it's a story that it's been played out 1,000 times with different guys, that for whatever reason, didn't prepare for what was, going to happen afterwards, or didn't have a plan, or didn't save, or didn't pay their taxes, as JR would always say. And I just made up my mind. I said, that's not going to be me. And truthfully, I know guys like that. We all do. We all know guys like that. We don't want to say it out loud. But this business is hard. It takes a real toll on your body. It can take a real toll on your mind. And, if you're not careful, you can really get, just trashed in this business and have nothing left. So I kind of, started making plans after the accident with Misawa, and him dying in the ring, and Noah, was kind of on their heels. The you know, at the time, the recession, you know, 2008, 2009, 2010, the recession, you know, business was down. So I actually went to work at the sheriff's department here in the town I live in. Grew up with a lot of those guys, so I had an in. And you know, I started winding down my in-ring career, and the sheriff's department actually throwed me a real nice. I had a retirement match in 2014 at my high school gym where I played basketball, place where I grew up. We packed it out. I had all my friends, you know, mostly from the indie scene, come in and brought the sheriff's department here, flew D'Lo in. So me and D'Lo tagged in my last match against Brad Lynch and AJ Steele, a couple of the guys that, you know, I'd worked on the indies for years, and had my retirement match and everything. And I was done. And I've been working for the sheriff's department ever since. I was a patrol officer. I worked my way up to investigations, and now I work at the courthouse. But I had kind of gotten away from it. And an old timer told me, you know, if you ever get out of this, don't ever come back around it, because, you know, you get sucked right back in. And sure enough, once Ben wanted to, you know, I started carrying him around the shows, and sure enough, I've wound up back in the ring with him several times, tagging, and we actually worked each other one time. So, and now, like I said, Zach, my youngest son, Zach, he's starting. So I've actually tagged with him once or twice. So, you know, I did exactly what I said I wasn't going to do, you know, get back into it. But, you know, but the one thing I did find out from that is it's not something that I could or would even want to just totally walk away from. When I started going back around these shows with Ben and seeing all my old friends and meeting a lot of new friends, you know, a lot of the new young guys that are in it, man, I've just had a blast. So now I honestly, I kind of split my time between the sheriff's department and, you know, going to these small shows around here. And I would like, my plans have always been to open up a training school. You know, I think that would be a good way that I could stay around the business, stay in the business, and you know, and not get any more busted up than I already am. But yeah, it's not something that I could walk away from. I think I was kind of kidding myself thinking I could, but the thing I found out, it's not something I want to walk away from. You know, I don't ever want to be away from this business. I've loved this business since I was 7 years old. I've been very fortunate. I've never spent a night in the hospital. I've never had any serious, well, I say serious injuries. You know, I've got a lot of problems in my lower back, some stuff in my neck going on. But man, you know, I have people all the time. And one night on the way back from a show somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, and Ben and myself driving, and, you know, he asked me, you know, would you do it again? And I said, not only would I do it again, I would go even harder, even, you know, more than I did then. I would, you know, I'd do it 8 days a week if I could. You know, I tell him and Zach all the time, you know, enjoy the time you have in this business, because you never know when it's going to be over. I had a long career. I had a healthy career. I made, you know, good money, and I have no complaints about my career, but you never know when it could be over. You know, it could have been over, you know, 2 days after, a month, you know, 3 years in, 5 years in. You never know when it's going to be over. So, you know, you got to appreciate it, because when it's over, it's, you know, it is over. You know, when they say, hey, you can't do this anymore, you know, you physically can't do this anymore, that's it. I mean, you can go out there and try, but it's not going to end well for most people. And, you know, but yeah, that's why I just try to tell these young guys, man, enjoy it, because it comes to an end too soon. you know, and then you're one of these old guys like me, just, you know, sweeping up or selling popcorn or something to try to stay around the business and, you know, still get your kicks on the weekend.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing all that with me, Bull. That's really awesome to hear. And, you know, happy to hear that you're still involved in some way in wrestling, because, you know, you contributed so much to it. It'll be a shame for you to not continue contributing in some way. We're getting to our final segment here on the show here, Bull. This is about finding out about your favorite things. It's a quick fire question for a quick fire answer. Let's see if you can do it.
Okay, cool.
The very first one is, who is your favorite pro wrestler of all time?
Tommy Rich.
Excellent. Do you have a favorite opponent over the years?
The Godfather.
Excellent. If you could pick one particular match that you performed in your career, say someone asks you, Bull, show me your best match, show me your favorite match that you were ever in, what would that match be?
It would come down to two matches, either myself against Godfather for his hose, or it was a match with Mendilo against Marufuji and Segura over in Japan for the GHC tag titles at Budokan.
Awesome, awesome. Getting away from wrestling now, Bull, do you have a favorite book?
The Bible.
Very popular answer on this show. Very good. Yeah. Do you have a favorite TV show?
Yellowstone right now. I'm really into that.
Excellent. So I love it.
Oh, cool.
Do you have a favorite film?
A favorite film?
Yeah.
Wow, and you stumped me on that one. Tombstone.
Another excellent film. Awesome. Do you have a favorite musical artist or band?
You know, I've thought about this a lot through the years, spent a lot of time in cars. I guess you'd have to kind of narrow it down to a genre. If I'm a big country music fan, so Hank Williams Jr. As far as rock goes, Leonard Skinner or AC/DC. Thunder from Down Under, man.
I love it, bro. Awesome. Good answer.
Yeah.
Getting away from the arts now, Bull. Do you have a favorite food?
Steak.
Awesome.
I'm sure that's a popular answer too.
That and pizza are pretty much the most popular answers on the show.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite place to eat on the road?
You know, we always tried to hit the Cracker Barrels and Waffle Houses, and like I said, we're rednecks, so anytime we can find a Waffle House, you know, we hit that or Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, those answers are very popular.
Everybody liked Outback too, though.
Of course.
Yeah, everybody liked Outback too, though.
Excellent, Bull. We've got 3 to go here. Do you have a favorite alcoholic beverage? And if you don't drink, just a favorite beverage in general?
I like a glass of dark wine before I go to bed.
I think that's a very, very good answer. That's what I do as well. I like a bit of red. Second last one here, Bull.
I like that mellow feeling.
Yeah, it's a really good feeling, isn't it? The second last one. This could be considered the most naughtiest question, but sometimes you get a very, very meaningful answer from it. It's favorite female body parts. So if Bull Buchanan sees a good-looking lady, you know, where will you look to first?
Eyes.
So we got a lot in common.
I think you know, the eyes of the the eyes of the good of the heart, you know.
Absolutely. That's my answer too. I always say eyes. And the last one, Bull, I don't think you've cursed once on this show. Oops, I lost you. So close, Luke. So close.
Hey, I'm sorry. We almost got done.
That's okay. I laughed very hard then because you were right near the end and then you dropped out.
I know.
So Bull, the last one is favorite curse word. I don't think you've said one curse word on the show, but if you had a favorite one, what would it be?
God, what's probably the one I say more than anything is what the hell. Being in law enforcement, you know, that's a common answer for about 90% of the things I run into is what the hell. You know, what the hell is going on here?
Excellent answer, Bull. Well, Bull Buchanan, it has been such a joy to have the opportunity to talk to you, learn about your career, because, you know, I always like to say this to some of the guests that I grew up watching when I was I started watching wrestling in 1998. I was 12 years old. I live in the most isolated city in the world, Perth, Western Australia. So you managed to reach all the way over to the most isolated city in the world and have a massive fan. All my friends were fans of yours as well. Way back when you were with the Bossman, RTC, everything. So I just want to let you know that you have fans from down under here, and I hope you're so proud of what you accomplished in not only your wrestling career but in life as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, just, you know, in closing, everybody that's ever been a fan, or whether you cheered me or booed me, you know, I hope you got your money's worth, and I hope you enjoyed it. And, you know, that's what we're doing this for. You know, it's, you know, if there weren't for you guys, you know, we would just be out there in an empty arena in a ring. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't work without you guys. So, you know, the appreciation is mutual.
Awesome, Bull. Well, thank you again. And thank all of you out there for joining us here on the Insider's Edge podcast. I'm Karlifornia. This is my new friend, Bull Buchanan, and we will see you down the road. Thank you.
Network, that's the way we play. Good God Almighty. Network, that's the way we play. Get puppies. Network, that's the way we play. Get.
The following announcement has been paid for by the WZWA Network.